The sound came just before dawn, a soft scratching against glass, so gentle that Dr. Catherine Morrison almost thought she had imagined it. She had been awake for hours anyway, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, wondering what she was supposed to do with the rest of her life. Retirement, they had told her, would be peaceful. They said she had earned it after 32 years of caring for wildlife in zoos and reserves across 3 continents. They did not mention the silence that would follow, the terrible, crushing silence of a life suddenly without purpose. Kate pushed herself up from bed, her joints protesting slightly as they always did these days, and walked barefoot across the cool tile floor toward her kitchen. The house she had rented sat on the very edge of Kruger National Park, a simple structure with faded yellow walls and a tin roof that sang when it rained. Through the window, the African sky was just beginning to lighten, that brief moment between night and day when the world holds its breath. And there, on her wooden porch, sat a leopard cub. For a moment, Kate simply stared. In all her years working with wildlife, she had never seen anything quite like this. The small creature sat upright on his haunches, one tiny paw raised and pressed against her glass door as if knocking. His amber eyes, impossibly large in his small face, looked directly at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He could not have been more than 3 months old. His golden coat was dusty, the rosette still forming in that soft pattern unique to very young leopards. Even through the glass, Kate could see he was thin, too thin. Her professional instincts kicked in immediately. She scanned his body for injuries, looking for blood, broken bones, obvious trauma. But there was nothing like that. He was simply malnourished, exhausted, and clearly alone. A cub that young should have been with his mother, learning to hunt, learning to survive. Instead, he was here, at her door, looking at her as if he knew exactly who she was and what she could do.
We need to get her
Kate knew she should not open that door. Every rule she had ever followed, every protocol she had ever enforced, screamed at her to call the park authorities and let them handle it. Wild animals, even orphan ones, especially predators, should never become dependent on humans. She knew this. She had spent 3 decades explaining this to well-meaning people who wanted to help. But she opened the door anyway. If you believe in the incredible bonds between humans and animals, if you believe that sometimes the universe brings exactly who we need into our lives at exactly the right moment, then please subscribe to Wild Heart Stories. Every subscription helps us share more of these extraordinary true stories that remind us we are all connected in ways we are only beginning to understand. These stories matter. Your support helps us keep telling them. The cub did not move when the door opened. He simply sat there, looking up at Kate, waiting. She knelt down slowly, keeping her movements calm and predictable. Up close, she could see the dust on his whiskers, the slight tremble in his small body, the way his ribs showed just a bit too clearly under his fur. "Where is your mother?" Kate whispered, though she already knew the answer. Leopard mothers do not abandon their cubs. Something had happened to her, poachers, perhaps, or another predator, or simply one of the 1,000 dangers that make the African bush both beautiful and brutal. The cub made a sound, a small, chirping mew that leopard cubs use to call their mothers. It was one of the saddest sounds Kate had ever heard. She stood up and went back inside, her mind racing. This was wrong. She should not interfere. But her hands were already opening cabinets, pulling out a shallow bowl, filling it with water. She had some chicken in her refrigerator, left over from her own dinner. She cut it into small pieces, the way she would for a domestic cat, though this was no house pet. When Kate brought the food and water outside, the cub had not moved from his spot by the door. She set both bowls down about 2 meters away and stepped back. For a long moment, he did not react. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to the water. He drank deeply, desperately, and Kate realized he had been dehydrated as well as hungry. After the water, he approached the chicken more cautiously, sniffing it carefully before taking a small piece, then another. Then he ate everything in the bowl. Kate watched from her doorway as the sun rose fully, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that only Africa seems capable of producing. The cub finished eating and sat back on his haunches, looking at her again. In that moment, Kate felt something she had not felt in the year since she retired. She felt needed. Catherine Morrison was 58 years old, and until last year, she had been one of the leading wildlife veterinarians in southern Africa. She had worked in major zoos in Europe and America, spent 15 years at a private reserve in Botswana, and consulted on conservation projects from Kenya to Cape Town. She had delivered elephant calves, treated injured lions, performed surgery on everything from meerkats to buffalo. Her ex-husband used to joke that she loved animals more than people. He was probably right. That was likely why they divorced. Kate had never wanted children. Her work was her family. The animals were her purpose. And when her body started to slow down, when the long hours and physical demands became too much, when the board of directors suggested it might be time to step aside for younger veterinarians with steadier hands, she agreed. She told herself she was ready for a quieter life. She was not ready. Not even close. Kate had moved to this small house 8 months ago, thinking that being near Kruger would be enough. She could observe wildlife, take photographs, enjoy nature without the responsibility. But observation was not the same as purpose. Photography was not the same as healing. Every day felt emptier than the last, until that morning. Until a 3-month-old leopard cub decided to sit on her porch and change everything. After he finished eating, Kate did what she knew she should have done from the beginning. She called the park rangers. She explained the situation, described the cub's condition, gave them her location. They said they would send someone, but it might take a few hours. They were dealing with a suspected poaching incident on the northern border. Everything was always urgent in conservation work. While Kate waited, she brought out an old blanket and spread it on the porch. The cub, surprisingly, walked over and settled onto it, curling into a tight ball. Within minutes, he was asleep. Kate sat nearby in her weathered plastic chair, watching his small sides rise and fall with each breath. Even in sleep, his paws twitched occasionally, and small sounds escaped his throat. He was dreaming. Kate wondered what orphaned leopard cubs dreamed about. The ranger who arrived was a young man named Tabo, barely 30, with the lean build and confident movements of someone who had grown up in the bush. He examined the cub carefully, professionally, while Kate stood back and tried not to interfere. Old habits died hard. No injuries, Tabo confirmed. Just malnourished and dehydrated. You did the right thing giving him food and water. Probably saved his life. What happens now? Kate asked, though she already knew. We take him to the rehabilitation center in Hoedspruit. They will care for him, assess whether he can be released back into the wild. If he's too young, if he can't learn a hunt, he might need to go to a sanctuary. Kate nodded. This was the correct protocol. This was what she would have recommended herself if someone had called her with this situation when she was still working. Tabo picked up the cub, who barely stirred, still exhausted from whatever journey had brought him to Kate's door. As they loaded him into the ranger vehicle, the cub opened his eyes briefly and looked back at her. Those amber eyes seemed to ask a question Kate could not answer. After they left, Kate cleaned up the bowls, folded the blanket, and went inside. The house felt even emptier than before. She tried to distract herself with chores, with reading, with anything, but her mind kept returning to those amber eyes, that small chirping mew, the way he had trusted her enough to sleep on her porch. Kate told herself it was better this way. The cub would get proper care. He would be evaluated by experts. He would have a chance at a real life, either in the wild or in a sanctuary where he could live with his own kind. Her involvement had been temporary, emergency care only. That was how it should be. That night, Kate barely slept. She kept imagining the cub waking up in a strange place, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and smells, wondering why the person who fed him had disappeared. She told herself she was being ridiculous, projecting human emotions onto a wild animal. But she had worked with leopards before. She knew how intelligent they were, how capable of forming bonds, how long their memories could be. The next morning, Kate woke before dawn again. This time, she knew why she had been restless. Some part of her had been listening for that soft scratching sound. But there was nothing. The house was silent except for the usual sounds of the African morning, birds calling, insects buzzing. the distant cough of a lion somewhere in the park. Kate made coffee and sat on her porch as the sun rose, feeling foolish for hoping. The cub was at the rehabilitation center, probably sleeping in a warming enclosure, being cared for by trained professionals. He had no reason to return here. He probably did not even remember her. Then she heard it, that small chirping mew. Kate stood up so quickly she nearly spilled her coffee, and there he was, sitting in exactly the same spot as yesterday, one paw raised to her door, amber eyes looking at her with what could only be described as recognition. He had come back. Tabo returned with the Ranger vehicle less than an hour after Kate called. This time, he looked more puzzled than concerned. He walked out of his enclosure during the night, Tabo explained. We thought maybe a fence was damaged, but everything was secure. He just left. And somehow found his way back here. That's more than 15 kilometers through the bush, Dr. Morrison. A cub that young should not be capable of that kind of navigation. They stood on Kate's porch, looking at the small leopard, who had once again made himself comfortable on her blanket. He watched them watch him, completely calm, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. What do you want me to do?
Kate asked.
Tabo rubbed his face, clearly trying to figure out the same thing. We can take him back again, but if he keeps returning, that creates a problem. A leopard who fixates on a human location, who loses his fear of people, that's dangerous for him and for you. He's not aggressive, Kate said quietly. He's just lost. I know, Tabo sighed. Let me talk to my supervisor. In the meantime, do not feed him, okay? Do not encourage this behavior. Maybe he'll get bored and leave on his own. After Tabo took the cub back again, Kate tried to follow his instructions.
She really did.
But that night, she lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the bush beyond her walls, thinking about a small leopard cub trying to navigate his way back to the only place that had offered him kindness, thinking about how many dangers existed in those 15 kilometers of wild Africa, thinking about how she had felt when she saw those amber eyes looking at her this morning, as if to say, I came back. I chose you. On the third morning, when Kate found him sitting at her door again, she did not call the Rangers right away. She sat down on the porch beside him, keeping a respectful distance. I do not know what you want from me, Kate said softly. I do not know why you keep coming back. But if you're going to keep doing this, we need to establish some rules. The cub tilted his head slightly, as if listening. In the growing light of dawn, Kate could see he was even thinner than before. All that walking, all that energy expended to return here, and no one was feeding him at the rehabilitation center anymore because they kept hoping he would settle in and accept his new situation. I cannot keep you, Kate told him firmly, as much to herself as to him. You are a wild animal. You belong in the wild, not with a retired veterinarian who barely knows how to take care of herself anymore. But I also cannot watch you starve yourself trying to get back here. Kate went inside and prepared food again, just a small amount, just enough to keep him alive. When she brought it out, he ate with the same desperate hunger as before, and something in her chest tightened painfully. This was how it started. This was how the next 10 days unfolded. Every morning, just before dawn, the cub would appear at Kate's door. Every morning, she would feed him small amounts, give him water, let him rest on the porch while she tried to figure out what to do. And every afternoon, Tabo would arrive, increasingly frustrated but also increasingly resigned, and take the cub back to the rehabilitation center. He's going to exhaust himself to death, Tabo said on the 7th day, his voice heavy with worry. Every night he walks back here, 15 kilometers through territory where bigger predators hunt. One of these nights, he's not going to make it. What do you suggest? Kate asked, though she could hear the defensive edge in her own voice. Tabo looked at her for a long moment. I think you already know, Dr. Morrison. He has chosen you. I do not understand it, and it goes against every protocol we have, but this cub has decided you are his only chance at survival. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That night, Kate sat on her porch long after sunset, watching the stars emerge in the enormous African sky. Her professional mind listed all the reasons this was wrong, all the ways this could end badly, all the rules she would be breaking. Her heart, that part of her she had tried to lock away when she retired, whispered something different. It whispered that maybe they were both orphans in their own way. Maybe they had both lost something essential and were trying to find their way back to it. Maybe the universe, in its strange wisdom, had brought them together because they needed each other. When dawn came on the 8th morning, Kate did not call the rangers when the cub appeared at her door. She opened it and let him inside her house for the first time. He walked in cautiously, sniffing everything, exploring with the careful curiosity of a very young predator. And when he finally settled on the cool tile floor of her kitchen, those amber eyes looking at her with complete trust, Kate made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She called Tabo. "I want to discuss a long-term solution," she said. "There has to be a way to do this, right? A way that keeps him wild but also keeps him alive." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then Tabo said, "I will talk to my supervisor. But Dr. Morrison, if we agree to this, you need to understand something. This is not about keeping a pet. This is about creating a new kind of relationship with a wild animal. One we're making up as we go, one that has no handbook, no proven method, no guarantee of success." "I know," Kate said, watching the small leopard who had somehow decided she was worth 15 kilometers of dangerous walking every single night. "I know exactly what this is." As Kate hung up the phone and sat down on her kitchen floor across from the cub, a thought occurred to her. He needed a name, not a pet name, but something to call him, something to distinguish him from the abstract concept of a leopard cub and acknowledge him as the specific, determined, extraordinary individual he was proving himself to be. "Amber," Kate said softly, thinking of those remarkable eyes that had looked into hers and seen something worth trusting. "I'm going to call you Amber." The cub's ears twitched at the sound. He blinked slowly, the way cats do when they are content, and for the first time since Kate had retired, since she had left behind everything that gave her life meaning, she felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. She felt hope. The meeting with park officials took place 3 days later in a small office that smelled of coffee and old paper. Tabo was there, along with his supervisor, a woman named Dr. Naledi Cumulo, who had worked in wildlife management for 2 decades. Also present was a representative from South African national parks, a stern-looking man in his 50s who introduced himself as Mr. van der Merwe. They all looked at Kate with varying degrees of skepticism as she sat across from them, trying to explain something she barely understood herself. "Let me be clear, Dr. Morrison," van der Merwe began, his Afrikaans accent thick. "What you are proposing is highly irregular. We do not have protocols for this situation because it should not exist. Wild leopards do not adopt humans as surrogate family members." "And yet," Kate said carefully, "this one has. The question is not whether it should happen, it already has happened. The question is what we do about it now." Dr. Cumulo leaned forward, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You have experience with big cats, yes? 32 years in wildlife veterinary medicine. You understand the risks, the challenges, the very real possibility that this could end badly for you or for the cub." "I understand better than anyone in this room," Kate replied, "which is exactly why I am the right person to attempt this. I know leopard behavior. I know their diet, their medical needs, their psychology. And most importantly, I know that the standard approach is not working. Amber has proven that he'll die trying to get back to my house if we keep removing him. So we either try something different, or we accept that we have condemned him to death through our own inflexibility." The room went quiet. Tabo cleared his throat. "I have been watching this situation develop for over a week now. The cub shows no aggression toward Dr. Morrison. He's not becoming habituated to humans in general, only to her, specifically. And, honestly, every day he survives is a day we did not expect. His determination is remarkable." Van der Merwe shook his head. "If we allow this, if we create some kind of official exception, it sets a precedent. Every person who finds an orphan cub will think they can keep it." "Then do not make it official," Kate suggested. "No press releases, no public acknowledgement, just a quiet understanding that in this specific situation, with my specific credentials and location, we are trying an experimental approach to see if a semi-wild arrangement can work. If it fails, we revert to standard protocol. If it succeeds, we learn something new about flexibility and conservation." Dr. Cumulo studied Kate for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? Kate took a deep breath. Amber stays on my property, which borders the park. I provide supplemental feeding while he is too young to hunt, but I do not make him dependent. I encourage him to explore, to develop natural behaviors, to maintain his wild instincts. As he matures, the feeding decreases until he is self-sufficient. He is not a pet. He is not captive. He is a wild leopard who happens to have formed an attachment to a specific location and person. We monitor him closely, document everything, and terminate the arrangement immediately if he shows any signs of dangerous habituation or health problems. And when he's full-grown? Vandermeer asked. When he is a 90-kilogram predator with claws and teeth designed to kill prey much larger than you? Then we hope that the respect and boundaries I establish now will carry forward, Kate said quietly. But I will not lie to you. There are no guarantees. This is uncharted territory. All I can promise is that I will apply 3 decades of expertise to giving him the best chance possible. The discussion continued for another hour. Forms were filled out, liability waivers were signed, monitoring schedules were established. By the time Kate left that office, she had official permission to attempt something that had probably never been tried before, at least not in any documented capacity. She was excited and terrified in equal measure. When Kate arrived home, Amber was sleeping on the porch, exactly where she had left him. At the sound of her vehicle, his head popped up, ears alert. When he recognized her, he made that small chirping sound and stood, his tail swishing slightly. It was the first time Kate had seen him display anything resembling excitement. Something about that tail swish, so cat-like and innocent, made her eyes sting with unexpected emotion. "Okay, little one," Kate said, kneeling down to his level. "We're doing this. But we're doing it right. That means rules. That means boundaries. That means you need to remember you are a leopard, not a house cat." Amber tilted his head, watching her with those enormous amber eyes. Kate knew he could not understand her words, but something about the tone of her voice seemed to register. He chirped again, softer this time, and she could not help but smile. The first few weeks were an education for both of them. Kate quickly remembered why she had once loved this work so much. Every day brought new challenges, new observations, new small victories. Amber needed to eat 4 times per day at his age, small meals of raw meat that Kate prepared carefully, mimicking as much as possible what he would have gotten from his mother. She mixed in bone fragments for calcium, organ meat for vitamins, varied the protein sources to ensure balanced nutrition. But feeding was only part of it. Amber was at a crucial developmental stage, the age when cubs learn to hunt, to climb, to defend themselves. Without a mother to teach him, Kate had to improvise. She hung pieces of meat from tree branches, forcing him to climb to retrieve them. She dragged feathered toys through the grass, encouraging him to stalk and pounce. She made him work for every meal, ensuring he developed the muscles and reflexes he would need to survive. Some moments were comical. Amber had an unfortunate tendency to misjudge distances when pouncing, often landing face first in the dirt before scrambling up and trying again with wounded dignity. He had not yet figured out that his back legs were longer than his front legs, which led to several spectacular tumbles when he tried to run at full speed. And he was absolutely terrified of Kate's garden hose, leaping backward with flattened ears whenever she turned it on, as if she had unleashed a deadly snake. Other moments were deeply touching. Amber would often sit beside Kate in the evenings as she read on the porch, not demanding attention, just existing in comfortable proximity. Sometimes he would fall asleep with his head resting on her foot, and Kate would sit frozen for hours rather than disturb him. His purr, when he did purr, was not like a domestic cat's. It was deeper, rougher, a sound that vibrated through his entire body. The first time Kate heard it, she cried. But there were also difficult moments, times when Kate questioned everything. Amber was growing quickly, his paws getting bigger, his teeth sharper, his strength more apparent. At 4 months old, he could already jump higher than Kate could reach. At 5 months, his play bites, which he seemed to think were gentle, left bruises on her arms. Kate had to constantly reinforce boundaries, redirecting his natural predatory behavior away from her and toward appropriate targets. "No," Kate would say firmly, removing his teeth from her hand and offering a thick rope toy instead. "Not me. Never me. I am not prey. I'm not a playmate. I'm your provider, but I am not your equal." Establishing dominance, without cruelty, was a delicate balance. Kate could not physically overpower him, nor would she try. Instead, she relied on tone of voice, body language, and consistency. When he obeyed, when he redirected his energy appropriately, she rewarded him with praise and food. When he pushed boundaries, she withdrew attention entirely, leaving him alone until he calmed down. Slowly, painfully slowly, he began to understand the rules. The biggest challenge came from outside Kate's property. Her nearest neighbor, a retired accountant named Henry Bota, was not pleased about the situation. He appeared at Kate's door one morning, his face red with anger. "There's a leopard on your property," he announced, as if Kate might not have noticed. "Yes," Kate replied calmly. "There is. That is illegal. That is dangerous. I have grandchildren who visit. What if that thing attacks them?" Kate took a deep breath, reminding herself that his fear was not unreasonable. "Mr. Bota, the leopard is being monitored by park officials. He stays on my property, which is fenced. He shows no interest in approaching other homes, and he is still very young, not a threat to anyone who does not threaten him first." "Young now," Henry shot back. "What about in 6 months? In a year? You are creating a dangerous situation for everyone in this area." "I understand your concerns," Kate said, keeping her voice level. "But this leopard was dying. He was orphaned, malnourished, and would not have survived without intervention. What would you have had me do? Let him starve on my porch?" Henry's expression softened slightly, but his jaw remained set. "There are sanctuaries for this sort of thing, places designed to handle wild animals. Your soft heart is going to get someone hurt, Dr. Morrison." After he left, Kate sat on her porch, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on her shoulders. He was right about one thing. Amber was growing. The adorable cub who had first appeared at her door was becoming a powerful predator. Every day, he looked a little less vulnerable and a little more dangerous. The question was whether the bond they were forming would be strong enough to override his predatory instincts when he reached full maturity. Tabo visited weekly to check on their progress, documenting Amber's weight, behavior, and development. During one visit, when Amber was about 6 months old, he watched as the young leopard climbed a tree with graceful ease, moving from branch to branch 20 meters above the ground. "He is doing well," Tabo admitted. "Better than I expected, honestly. His hunting skills are developing. I've seen him catch birds, rodents, even a small antelope last week. He is learning to be a leopard." "But," Kate asked, hearing the unspoken concern in his voice, "but he still sleeps on your porch every night. He still waits for you every morning. He is surviving, Dr. Morrison, but he is not independent. What happens when you are not here anymore?" The question hung in the air between them. Kate had been avoiding thinking about it, but Tabo was forcing her to confront reality. She was 58 years old. She had high blood pressure, arthritis in her hands, and a family history of heart disease. She might have 20 good years left. She might have 5. What happened to Amber if she died suddenly? Would he transfer his attachment to another human, creating problems for the park? Would he starve, having lost the person who had become the center of his world? "I do not know," Kate admitted quietly. "I'm making this up as I go along, Tabo. Every single day, I am trying to balance keeping him alive with keeping him wild, and I have no idea if I am succeeding at either." Tabo put a hand on Kate's shoulder. "For what it is worth, I think you are doing something remarkable. I think you are trying to solve an impossible problem with compassion and intelligence. But you need to start thinking about the long term, about transitioning him toward independence, because one day, whether you want to or not, you're going to have to let him go." That night, Kate could not sleep. She lay in bed, listening to Amber moving around on the porch, the soft pat of his paws, the occasional scratch of claws on wood. He was so much bigger now. At 6 months old, He weighed close to 20 kilograms. His spots were fully defined, his muscles well-developed, his movements confident and powerful. He was becoming magnificent. But he was also becoming hers, and she was becoming his. And that was the problem. They were forming a bond that defied nature, that went against every principle of wildlife management, that could end in disaster for both of them. And yet, Kate could not bring herself to regret it. Because every morning, when she woke up and saw those amber eyes looking at her, she felt alive in a way she had not felt since retiring. She felt needed. She felt purposeful. She felt like herself again. The turning point came during Amber's 7th month. Kate woke one morning to find him not on the porch, but standing in her doorway, inside her house. He had learned to open the screen door, a development that both impressed and concerned her. He stood there looking at her, his tail swishing slowly. "No," Kate said firmly, pointing outside. "You know the rules. Outside is your space. Inside is mine." Amber did not move. He tilted his head, studying her, and Kate could almost see the wheels turning in his leopard brain. He was testing her, seeing if the boundaries still held, curious about the spaces she had always denied him. Kate stood up slowly, making herself as large as possible, and moved toward him with deliberate confidence. "Out," she said, her voice lower, harder now. For a moment, they stood there, woman and leopard, both of them trying to figure out who was in charge. Then Amber huffed, turned, and walked back outside. But he stopped just beyond the doorway and looked back at Kate with an expression that was unmistakably smug. Kate started laughing. She could not help it. He was testing her, yes, but he was also playing. He was seeing what he could get away with, the way any young animal would. And when she enforced the boundary, he accepted it, without aggression, without defiance. That was the moment Kate realized something crucial. Amber understood their relationship. He knew she was not his mother, not his littermate, not his prey. She was something else entirely, something without a name in leopard society. She was his anchor point, his safe harbor, his connection to the world of humans. But he was still a leopard. And that was exactly how it should be. As the months passed, Kate developed a routine that worked for both of them. Amber hunted in the early mornings and late evenings, bringing down small prey with increasing skill. Kate supplemented his diet only when necessary, gradually reducing the amount of food she provided. He spent his days exploring the property, climbing trees, sunbathing on warm rocks, engaging in all the natural behaviors leopards should engage in. And he spent his evenings on Kate's porch, sometimes sleeping, sometimes watching the world, sometimes just existing in companionable silence with a strange human who had become his unlikely family. Kate documented everything. She filled notebooks with observations, took hundreds of photographs, recorded videos of his development. Part of this was scientific, fulfilling her end of the agreement with park officials. But part of it was personal. She was chronicling something extraordinary, something that might never happen again. A wild leopard and a lonely woman, both orphaned in their own ways, both learning what it meant to share space without possession, to care without controlling, to love without domesticating. Because that was what this was becoming, though Kate hesitated to use the word. Love. Not the love of a pet owner, not the love of a mother, but something different, something that honored his wildness while acknowledging their connection. Something that said, "I see you for exactly what you are, and I am honored to share this moment with you, however long it lasts." On the evening of Amber's 9th month, Kate sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Amber lay on the wooden planks a few meters away, grooming himself with the meticulous attention cats bring to such tasks. He was huge now, easily 30 kilograms, his body long and muscular, his movements fluid and powerful. He looked like a leopard. He acted like a leopard. But every few minutes, he would glance over at Kate, those amber eyes checking to make sure she was still there. "You are going to break my heart," Kate told him softly. "You know that, right? One day, you are going to meet a female leopard, or establish your own territory, or simply decide that this strange arrangement we have is no longer necessary. And I am going to have to let you go." I'm going to have to watch you walk away and be happy about it, because that will mean I succeeded in keeping you wild. Amber paused in his grooming and looked at Kate for a long moment. They simply gazed at each other, woman and leopard, unlikely friends in an impossible situation. Then he stood, stretched in that boneless way cats have, and walked over to her. He bumped his head against her knee once, gently, before returning to his spot and resuming his grooming. It was the most deliberate display of affection he had ever shown her, and it told Kate everything she needed to know. They were going to be okay, both of them. Whatever happened next, however this story ended, they had given each other exactly what they needed. He had given her purpose. She had given him life. And in the space between those two gifts, they had created something rare and precious, something worth every complicated, uncertain, beautiful moment. The first time Amber disappeared for an entire night, Kate barely slept. He was 14 months old by then, nearly full-grown, capable of taking down prey almost his own size. Kate knew this day would come. She had prepared herself for it, told herself she would be ready when he finally ventured beyond the boundaries of her property to explore the wider world that was his birthright. She was not ready. Kate spent that night pacing her small house, checking the porch every 20 minutes, listening for sounds that never came. By dawn, she had convinced herself that something terrible had happened. Another leopard had killed him, poachers had found him, he had been injured and was lying somewhere in pain, alone, unable to make it back. Her imagination created 1,000 horrible scenarios, each worse than the last. Then, just as the sun broke the horizon, Kate heard that familiar sound, a soft chirp at her door. She nearly ran outside, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Amber sat on the porch, looking completely unconcerned, grooming one paw as if nothing unusual had happened. There was fresh blood on his muzzle, evidence of a successful hunt. He glanced up at Kate, blinked slowly, and returned to his grooming. "You could have at least left a note," Kate muttered, sinking into her chair, adrenaline slowly draining from her system. Amber ignored her, which was probably fair. That became the new pattern. Some nights, Amber would sleep on Kate's porch as he had always done. Other nights, he would disappear into the darkness and return by morning, sometimes with fresh kills, sometimes just smelling of the bush, of freedom, of the wild spaces where Kate could not follow. Each absence got a little longer. Each return felt like a gift. Kate was learning to let go. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. By the time Amber turned 18 months old, he was magnificent. He weighed close to 45 kilograms of pure muscle and grace. His coat had developed into the stunning pattern unique to leopards, rosettes perfectly formed, colors rich and vibrant. His eyes had matured from the enormous amber of a cub to the intense, intelligent gaze of an apex predator. When he moved through the trees around Kate's property, he was liquid shadow, barely visible even when she knew exactly where to look. Tourists sometimes spotted him from the road that passed near Kate's house. She would watch them stop their vehicles, cameras clicking frantically, excited voices carrying on the wind. They saw a beautiful wild leopard. They did not know he was the same small, desperate cub who had once sat at her door begging for help. They did not know how many mornings Kate and Amber had shared, watching the sunrise together. They did not know that sometimes, when he thought Kate was not looking, he would rest his head on the porch railing and just breathe, as if the scent of her presence brought him some kind of peace. Tabo still visited monthly, though his documentation had shifted from concern to fascination. "You have done something remarkable here, Dr. Morrison," he said during one visit, watching Amber lounge on a high branch, completely at ease. "He is fully wild, self-sufficient, behaves exactly as a leopard should behave. But he maintains this connection to you, to this place. I have been studying leopards for 15 years, and I have never seen anything like it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?"
Kate asked.
Tabo considered the question carefully. "I think it is simply a unique thing, neither good nor bad, just different. You have proven that the line between wild and domestic is not as clear as we thought, that an animal can be completely himself while also maintaining a relationship with a human. That is going to change how we think about conservation, about rehabilitation, about the possibility of coexistence. But Kate was not thinking about conservation theories or academic papers. She was thinking about the day when Amber would stop coming back, when he would find a mate, establish his own territory far from here, move on to the life he was meant to live. She was thinking about how empty her porch would feel, how silent her mornings would become, how much it was going to hurt to lose him, even though losing him would mean she had succeeded. The transformation began on an ordinary Tuesday morning in spring. Kate was reading on her porch, coffee growing cold in her hand, when she heard unusual sounds from the tree line. Amber emerged, but he was not alone. He was carrying something carefully in his mouth, moving with slow deliberation. As he got closer, Kate realized what it was: a baby impala.
Alive.
Kate's breath caught. The tiny antelope dangled from Amber's jaws, held gently by the scruff of its neck, the way a mother cat carries kittens. The impala was not struggling. It simply hung there, its large eyes wide but calm, as if it somehow understood it was not being carried by a predator, but by something else entirely. Amber walked directly to Kate's porch and laid the impala down carefully at her feet. Then he sat back and looked at her expectantly. For a moment, Kate could not move. She could only stare at this impossible scene. A leopard, a creature designed by evolution to be the perfect solitary hunter, had just brought her live prey and placed it at her feet like an offering, like a gift, like he was asking her to do something. Then Kate saw the injury. The impala's front left leg was twisted at an odd angle, clearly broken. This was why it had been separated from its herd, why it had become vulnerable to predation. But Amber had not killed it. He had brought it to Kate. "Oh," Kate whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Oh, Amber. You remember." Kate moved slowly, kneeling beside the small antelope. It trembled, but did not try to flee. She examined the leg carefully, her veterinary training taking over automatically. Clean break, no compound fracture, very treatable with proper splinting. This baby could recover fully with care. Amber watched Kate work, his tail twitching slightly, his eyes tracking every movement. Kate spoke to him softly as she went inside to gather supplies, telling him what she was doing, knowing he could not understand the words but hoping he could hear the tone of approval, of pride, of absolute astonishment at what he had just done. Kate treated the impala on her porch, splinting the leg, checking for other injuries, administering antibiotics from her old medical kit. The entire time, Amber lay nearby, observant but relaxed, like a student watching a teacher work. When Kate finished, she set up a small enclosure on the side of her house, a safe space where the impala could rest and heal without fear of predation. Amber watched Kate move the baby antelope into the enclosure. He did not try to follow, did not show any predatory interest. He simply observed, then stood, stretched, and walked back toward the trees. Before disappearing into the foliage, he glanced back at Kate once. She could have sworn he looked satisfied. That was the beginning of something Kate never could have predicted. Over the following months, Amber brought her 3 more animals: a baby warthog with a deep gash on its side, probably from a confrontation with thorns or another animal, a young mongoose with an infected paw, a bird with a damaged wing. Each time, he carried them carefully, placed them near Kate, and waited while she assessed and treated them. Each time, he showed no interest in harming them once they were in her care. He had learned from watching Kate, from their years together. He had somehow understood that she was someone who fixed broken things. And now, he was bringing her the broken things he found, trusting her to do what she did best. Kate started treating animals again, not in a clinic, not in an official capacity, just quietly, in the small space beside her house. Word began to spread among her neighbors. People would call when they found injured wildlife, asking if it was true that the retired veterinarian with the leopard was helping animals again. Some came with creatures they had found: wounded birds, orphan mammals, victims of vehicle collisions. Kate never advertised. She never charged. She just did what she had always done, what she had always been meant to do. And Amber continued his patrols, continued his strange habit of bringing Kate patients. It became routine, this impossible collaboration between wild predator and human healer. He would hunt for himself, maintain his territory, behave exactly as a leopard should. But sometimes, when he encountered something injured and young and vulnerable, he would bring it to Kate instead of viewing it as food. Tabo was fascinated when Kate told him. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, his voice filled with excitement. "He has not just maintained his wild nature while forming a bond with you, he has integrated both worlds. He is teaching us that animals are capable of far more complex thinking than we have given them credit for, that they can hold multiple concepts simultaneously, can make choices based on more than just instinct." But for Kate, it was simpler than that. Amber had given her back her purpose, just as she had given him life. They had healed each other, and now they were healing others together. It was a circle, complete and beautiful, and Kate was grateful for every moment of it. The day Amber met Zara, Kate knew immediately that everything was about to change. He was 22 months old by then, in his prime, powerful and confident, and ready for the next phase of his life. She was a young female leopard, probably just reaching maturity herself, who had been moving through the area for several weeks. Kate had seen her tracks, heard her calls at night, watched Amber's behavior shift subtly as he became aware of her presence. On the morning they finally encountered each other, Kate was on her porch as usual. Amber appeared from the tree line, but this time, a female leopard walked beside him. She was smaller than him, sleeker, with beautiful markings and cautious amber eyes that assessed Kate carefully from a safe distance. Amber looked between them, his tail swishing in what Kate had learned to recognize as a sign of mild agitation or uncertainty. He was trying to introduce them. The realization made Kate's throat tight. Kate stood slowly, making no sudden movements. "Hello, Zara," she said softly, naming her without thinking. "You are beautiful. Take care of him, will you?" Zara did not approach. Leopards are solitary creatures, and she had no reason to trust humans, but she did not flee either. She simply stood there beside Amber, watching, waiting, trying to understand this strange dynamic between the male leopard and the human. After several minutes, Zara turned and walked back toward the trees. Amber hesitated, glancing at Kate, then at Zara, clearly torn between two worlds. Kate smiled at him, even though her heart was breaking. "Go on," Kate told him gently. "She is waiting for you. This is what you are meant to do. This is what we have been working toward all along." Amber took a step toward the trees, then stopped. He looked back at Kate one more time, and in that moment, she saw everything they had shared reflected in his eyes. The mornings on the porch, the lessons learned, the trust built, the impossible friendship that had saved them both. Then he turned and followed Zara into the forest. And Kate was alone on her porch for the first time in nearly 2 years. The tears came. Then hot and unstoppable. Kate sat down heavily in her chair and let herself cry, let herself feel the loss and the pride and the complicated grief of watching someone you love walk away toward the life they are meant to have. It hurt more than she had expected. It hurt more than she thought possible. But underneath the hurt, there was something else. Relief, satisfaction, the bone-deep knowledge that she had done this right. Kate had taken a dying orphan and turned him into a thriving wild leopard, capable of forming his own family, maintaining his own territory, living the life nature intended. She had not kept him. She had not tamed him. She had simply loved him enough to let him be exactly what he was supposed to be. For 3 days, Amber did not return. Kate threw herself into caring for the animals currently in her enclosures, finding distraction in work, trying not to listen for sounds that did not come. Neighbors stopped by, bringing injured creatures, staying to chat, treating Kate as if she was running an actual rehabilitation center now. It was bittersweet, having purpose again, but without the presence that had made it all meaningful. On the 4th morning, just before dawn, Kate woke to that familiar sound, a soft chirp at her door. Kate went outside to find Amber on her porch, and her heart soared before she could stop it. But he was not alone. Zara stood at the edge of the clearing, watching warily. And in Amber's mouth, carried with infinite care, was a young baboon with a badly wounded arm. He had brought her with him. He had shown her what they did here. He had introduced her to this strange collaboration between species. And, together, they had brought Kate a patient. Kate treated the baboon, while both leopards watched from a respectful distance. Amber sat calmly, as he always had. Zara remained alert, ready to flee but curious enough to stay. When Kate finished, when the baboon was safely in an enclosure, Amber stood and walked over to her. He bumped his head against her hand once, gently. Then he turned and walked back to Zara. They disappeared into the trees together. But this time, Kate knew he would come back. Not every day, not even every week necessarily, but he would return. Because this place, this strange little corner of the bush where wild and human met without fear, was part of his territory now, part of his story, part of who he had become. Over the following months, Kate saw Amber regularly, though never predictably. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with Zara, occasionally bringing injured animals that needed care. Kate learned to read the signs of his presence even when she did not see him directly. Tracks in the dust, distinctive claw marks on trees, the particular arrangement of bones from his kills. He was living his life, establishing his territory, courting Zara, doing all the things a wild male leopard should do. But he had not forgotten Kate. And she had not lost him. Their relationship had simply evolved into something new, something that honored both his wildness and their connection. He was not her pet. He was not her responsibility. He was a wild leopard who sometimes chose to bring the broken things he found to a human he trusted to fix them. One morning, almost a year after Amber had first walked away with Zara, Kate woke to find 2 leopards on her porch. Amber sat in his usual spot, looking relaxed and content. Beside him, Zara lay with 2 tiny cubs nursing at her side. They could not have been more than a few weeks old, still blind, completely helpless, their rosettes barely visible on impossibly soft fur. Amber looked at Kate, and she swore there was pride in his expression. "Look," he seemed to say. "Look what we made. Look at the family I have. Look at how far I have come from that desperate orphan cub who showed up at your door." Kate sat down slowly, careful not to make sudden movements, and just watched. Zara was tolerating her presence, which was extraordinary in itself. Female leopards with cubs are notoriously protective, aggressive toward any perceived threat. But she allowed Kate to sit there, to witness this intimate moment, because Amber had convinced her she was safe, because the trust they had built extended to his family. The cubs, 1 male and 1 female, were perfect. They made small mewing sounds as they nursed, their tiny paws kneading against their mother's belly. Amber lay nearby, relaxed but watchful, the picture of a proud father. Kate could not speak. She could only sit there, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the gift of this moment. Amber had not just survived, he had thrived. He had found love, created a family, built the life. And he trusted Kate enough to share it with her. They stayed for perhaps an hour, long enough for the cubs to finish nursing and fall asleep. Then Zara stood carefully, gathering her babies in her mouth one at a time, and carried them back toward the trees. Amber stood as well, but before following his family, he walked over to Kate one last time. He pressed his forehead against her knee, held it there for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the forest. It was the last time Kate saw him at such close range. After that day, he maintained more distance, as was appropriate for a wild leopard with a family to protect. But Kate still saw evidence of his presence regularly. She still treated the injured animals he and Zara occasionally brought to the edge of her property, left carefully where she would find them. She still felt his eyes watching from the trees sometimes, making sure she was okay, checking on the strange human who had saved his life so long ago. Kate's small, informal rehabilitation center grew. People came from all over the region, bringing injured wildlife. Local schools brought children on field trips to learn about conservation. The park arranged for Kate to mentor young veterinarians interested in wildlife medicine. She was not officially employed, not drawing a salary, but she was working again. She was needed again. She was herself again. And all of it, all of this second chapter of her life, had started with one small leopard cub who refused to give up, who walked 15 kilometers through dangerous territory 10 nights in a row because he had decided Kate was worth it. Kate was 61 years old now, and she knew her time was limited. The high blood pressure was under control, but she felt her age in ways she did not before. Her hands were not as steady, her vision was not as sharp, her body reminded her daily that she was mortal, that this story would not last forever. But for however much time she had left, Kate would keep doing this work. She would keep fixing the broken things that found their way to her door. She would keep watching the tree line for glimpses of amber eyes, for the shadow of a leopard who changed her life, who taught her that connection does not require possession, that love can exist across the boundary between species, that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected places. Amber gave Kate back her purpose. She gave him a chance at life. And in the space between those two gifts, they created something rare and precious, and absolutely worth every complicated, uncertain, beautiful moment. This morning, Kate sits on her porch as the sun rises, coffee growing cold in her hand. The air is crisp with the promise of autumn. In her enclosures, 3 young animals are healing, recovering, preparing to return to the wild. In the trees beyond her property, a family of leopards hunts and plays and lives the life they were meant to live. And Kate is here, in this small house on the edge of Kruger National Park, doing what she was always meant to do, not because she planned it this way, not because she followed any handbook or protocol, but because one small, desperate, determined leopard cub decided she was worth trusting. Sometimes, Kate still hears that soft chirping sound at dawn, though she knows it is probably just memory, the echo of something precious that once was. Sometimes, she imagines she sees amber eyes watching from the shadows, though it is probably just light playing tricks on aging vision. But sometimes, just sometimes, when Kate looks out at the wild world beyond her porch, she sees clear evidence that she is not alone. Fresh tracks in the dust, a distinctive claw mark on her favorite tree, the remains of a kill left carefully where she will find it, as if to say, I am still here. I remember. I am grateful. And in those moments, Kate knows with absolute certainty that what they created, she and Amber, was real. That it mattered. That it changed them both in ways neither could have predicted. That it was worth everything. Kate finishes her coffee, sets the empty cup aside, and stands to begin her day. There are animals to feed, wounds to tend, small lives to nurture back to health. There is work to do, purpose to fulfill, healing to facilitate. Somewhere in the forest, a leopard pauses in his morning hunt to glance toward a small yellow house where a woman once saved his life. He does not think about it in human terms, does not understand concepts like gratitude or debt or love. He simply knows that this place is safe, that this human can be trusted, that when he finds something broken, he can bring it here and it will be fixed. He returns to his hunting, to his family, to his wild life. And the woman returns to her healing, to her purpose, to the second chance she never expected to receive. Both of them are exactly where they belong. Both of them are home.